10 years ago, the Supreme Court decided a foundational Second Amendment case called District of Columbia versus Heller, in which it held that the Second Amendment protects the individual right to keep and bear arms for certain private purposes like self-defense. But the court also left a lot of other questions unanswered, and maybe the biggest one is whether and how that right extends outside the home. So in Heller, the petitioner just wanted to have a gun in his home for self-defense, but there's been many other petitioners since then who want to be able to take their guns into public spaces, and that raises a whole host of different legal questions that weren't necessarily squarely addressed in Heller. For us, and especially from the perspective of the Center for Firearms Law, this is an area where the legal questions, the litigation questions, and the scholarly questions intersect in a really important and interesting way. This is one area where actually challenges, Second Amendment challenges, have seen some success. That is, some of these gun regulations have actually been struck down. And that raises interesting questions for law. What's the Supreme Court going to do when it directly has to address this question? But from a scholarly perspective, which is our perspective, this is at the intersection of fascinating questions for the Second Amendment, for empirics, for history. And so the chance to bring those two things together is really what motivated this symposium. One of the goals of the Center for Firearms Law is to help build up firearms law as a scholarly community, and this is a fantastic opportunity for us to do that. So we've got some people who are just starting in the academy, and firearms law is a major focus for them, and that's great to have them in the same room with people who've been, in some cases, writing on this for decades. We also have, and this is, I think, exciting, some scholars who have sort of made their bones in other areas of law and are now turning to this issue because they're recognizing how fascinating it can be. So established constitutional law scholars, for example, who've written on the First Amendment for decades and are now turning their considerable skills and important attention to this question. We're so excited. This is sort of the inaugural symposium for the Center for Firearms Law, and we couldn't have a better lineup. We're so excited to have the discussion.